When you are a solopreneur, you do everything. Like you're wearing all the hats. You're doing your marketing, you're doing the business development, you're doing the invoicing, you're doing compiling your financials, the tax returns, you're doing delivering the whatever service or product you're making. So it is a lot and it takes a lot of time away from maybe what you intentionally got into doing that work.
Welcome to Business Buying for Financial Independence. I'm Tim Delaney, and I help young professionals buy small businesses so they can escape the 9 to 5 and take control of their time, income, and future. If that sounds like you, hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Hello. Welcome to Business Buying for Financial Independence. My name is Tim, and today I am here with Lindsey Zajac. Lindsey is the owner and CEO of a talent solutions firm that is committed to elevating careers, empowering leaders, and enriching lives by providing world-class services in outplacement, search, and leadership development. Prior to purchasing the business in 2024, she spent 15 years in corporate HR. Lindsey excelled in fast-paced organizations ranging from a startup to a Fortune 50 organization. She is an advanced certified leadership coach and a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. Look forward to hearing more about all of that stuff. Thank you for being here, Lindsey.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Let's just start off with telling everybody a little bit about your background, your professional background, where you came from, and where you are now.
Sure. So I was one of those people that went to college and really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I really kind of fell into HR. It wasn't something I set out to go study. I didn't go to college for it, but I had a few internships in HR over the summer, sophomore and junior year, and ended up like my first job out of college. I was sort of an HR admin doing payroll and benefits. After that, I kind of fell into recruiting, which I really enjoyed for a while. I actually moved down to New York City for 2.5 years and did staffing for financial services, a lot of accountants and financial analysts. So learned a lot about recruiting and sales. Um, and then I kind of navigated, moved back home to Syracuse, fell into more HR generalist roles, which I really liked. It was kind of a combination of what I had been through with a little bit more of that strategic business partner element, helping managers and helping the organization with their talent needs. And so that all those things I kept, working for different companies. I was one of those people that every 2 to 3 years I moved to another company as a way to grow and continue to advance my career. So wasn't necessarily as common as it is now or as accepted as it is now, but that was what worked for me. Otherwise, I would have hit a ceiling at a lot of these smaller companies I worked for because there was nowhere to grow.
So you're a trendsetter.
Maybe. Or I was just really impatient. But what I do think when I look back and connect the dots, all of those different critical experiences in different companies um, helps what I'm doing now because so much of what we do is sort of consulting and helping various clients in all different companies, all different industries, all different sizes. And I've had a little bit of that breadth of experience to relate to some of the things that they're going through.
Awesome. So did you do all of those different things as a path towards owning your own business one day? Or is that in your mind at all?
It was not in my mind at all. The only thing in my mind was I didn't want to be stuck in the same job forever. I definitely like variety. I like to be challenged. I'm finding out now in my 40s that I am a pretty ambitious person. But for me, it was more about just growth and not hitting a ceiling. It was also about really the experience, making sure I found the right fit, the right kind of culture, the right kind of organization. The business ownership piece really didn't start to enter my, you know, um, even come into fruition until maybe mid-30s when I started having kids and trying to work in corporate America with a grueling schedule and an 8 to 5 in the office and a lot of travel. That's when I started to dabble with, could I do this on my own? Should I get into consulting? Should I work for myself? But to answer your question, when I was younger, that was not sort of the goal that I was striving for.
Mhm. So how did it come about that you ended up owning your own business then?
Yeah, so what happened was, with my husband's support and with a lot of thought and reflection, I decided to leave. My last HR role was with Pepsi. I was an HR manager there. I loved it. Had a great experience, great people, great organization. So I made a very tough decision to walk away from all of that to say, I'm going to bet on myself and I'm going to just do some coaching and training and leadership on my own and, start to build kind of my own book of business. So I like to say that was my solopreneur journey because it was me. I started an LLC, developed a website, and I was just doing coaching and development for companies. Got my coaching certification, things like that. So I did that from 2018 to 2022. Good years, bad years. Obviously, you throw in a global pandemic in the mix. I learned a lot. I enjoyed working for myself, but COVID taught me that I wanted a bigger, stronger foundation than just me, myself, and I working out of my home. So the opportunity to purchase career partners at the times really presented itself in that kind of 2022 timeframe. I knew Mark and Dottie, the previous owners from Pepsi. I had developed relationships with them. I knew of the business. I knew their reputation, and it was appealing to me to say, well, I still want to work for myself, but I don't want to be a solopreneur. I'm attracted to they have the infrastructure, they have the business, they have the clients, they have the team, they have a lot of things in place. Maybe I can just make it my own versus having to do that for 20 years to grow to where they were.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I talk about a lot with people, of the advantages of buying an existing business versus starting on your own.
Yeah.
And so you had that relevant experience. You went out and started
I did.
from scratch on your own versus and then choosing to buy a different business or a similar but different business with that infrastructure. So what I guess you found it attractive because of those systems, because of the team in place and all of those things. I assume that because this was such a great opportunity, that the sellers had people beating down their door to buy. You had to a
They
tough
Yeah,
competition.
so over the years, because they've been around for 30 plus years, they had had a lot of, people who just loved what they did. Maybe they went through the program, they had a great experience, so they had a lot of interested parties approaching them, um, but they wanted someone that really had an HR background, was open to being a business owner, um, wanted to sort of take it to the next level, you know, was hungry enough to do some of the work. A lot of the people who approached them were more seasoned, were at the kind of tail end of their careers. And I think they really wanted someone who'd be around for a while.
So it was that relationship, your previous knowledge of them and them of you, and that
Yeah.
relationship that had really helped solidify you as the ideal buyer in their minds?
Yes, and I was kinda shocked actually when they first approached me. I don't know if it was imposter syndrome or if it was just, like, again, was never on my radar, but I was kinda like, "Really? Me? What little old me? I'm just doing my thing over here, like, HR person? Oh, are you sure?" But I think they saw something in me that I maybe didn't see in myself, and, I think that's something we had talked about previously. you know, a lot of people don't think that they don't see themselves as business owners or don't think it's something they could do. And I was kind of the same way. But as you start to learn more about what's involved, none of this is rocket science. And it's really just being curious and understanding the business and wanting to learn. And I think the biggest thing for me was really unpacking their financials and really getting into their P&L and L and learning how everything worked. That was probably the biggest learning curve. Yeah. I did. What? Yeah, so initially, they actually brought me on part-time because I still had my LLC and I was kinda doing both. I like to joke, I was wearing 2 different jerseys, 2 different emails, like, which who am I doing today? So did that for a little while, then I came on full-time, and when I realized, "Okay, I'm really serious about potentially buying this business," then they started to open up, like, "Okay, let's look back at 5 years of financials. Let's look back and let's, start to understand this business." Sort of open up those drawers and start to look at some things that you might not share with just anyone that's kicking the tires. So I had a good 18 months to work with them, learn the business inside and out, learn how they do it, watch them in action, shadow them, and really unpack and, understand some of the levers that make this business work. Um, and I think the P&L really tells a huge story, which people might not know, but it tells a lot. And I saw a lot of opportunity in the P&L. If we cut
Hmm.
back here, if we kind of lower these expenses, and if we maybe add some here, it does take a little money to make money. But I think that's what's really closed the deal for me was I can work with this. This is a pretty viable business. It's got some room for growth.
Yeah. And for those that might not be aware, P&L is profit and loss statement, which is what shows the incoming revenue and the outgoing expenses and what you're left with or not left with at the end of the day. So
Sure.
ideally, you would like it to be a P statement and not the loss statement, which it sounds like your situation was, which made it attractive for you. When you joined part as a part-time employee, was there already talks of possible ownership or buying them out in the future?
Yes, there were some talks because I really wouldn't have stepped away from my business and started to kinda wear their jersey if I wasn't really serious about it. Because I think it just causes confusion and kinda like, "What are you doing dabbling with these people?" Um, so I was pretty serious, but I wasn't sure yet. I was still in that vetting stage, that research stage.
And that's a great way to do research as well, to actually get in there and, uh, work within the company, work with the people that you're going to be working with long term and buying the business from. It's a
Yeah.
great strategy. And it's not like, a lot of people talk about business in general as a very risky proposition, and it is. There's risk to everything in life. I and it's not like you started up your business and folded immediately. You had 4 or 5 years of your own business, yet you still chose to move over and make this acquisition rather than continue your own thing. So I think that just shows the strength and the power of buying something existing and the acceleration that you can have by doing that.
Yeah, it was one of those and trust me, there were a lot of people who said, "Well, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, you're doing
Yep.
pretty well. Just
Yep.
stay on the course." And maybe it's I wasn't patient enough
Yep.
to stay the course. But also when you are a solopreneur, you do everything. Like, you're wearing all the hats. You're doing your marketing, you're doing the business development, you're doing the invoicing, you're doing compiling your financials, the tax returns, you're doing delivering the whatever service or product you're making. So, it is a lot, and it takes a lot of time away from maybe what you intentionally got into doing that work. I just wanna be a coach. I just wanna train and help organizations, but so much of what I was doing was, like, networking events and selling and BD and, so, yeah, and I do think ultimately it's gonna take me 20 years to build this book of business that this existing company has been working on for 30.
Mhm.
What's the easier transition?
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You start it's almost like a head start.
it's a head start, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Uh, you don't have to get into specifics on the financials, but could you share a little bit about how you structured the deal and
Mhm.
Whether or not it was a big cash outlay for you to get into this, or there's a common assumption that in order to buy a business, you have to be uber wealthy and have multiple trust funds from grandparents and parents and all that kind of stuff. So, could you talk a little
Great
bit about
question.
that?
Yeah, so one of the reasons this was appealing to me was I didn't have to go, you know, put down a cash deposit or take money out of my savings or my 401k or I didn't have to do any of that. So the good news was the way they structured the deal was it was paid out through the business. So it was really a seller finance. Um, and I was basically paying them over, 4 or 5 years through the revenue coming into the business. So there were a couple things that I had to do, a life insurance policy. I had to get a line of credit. There were certain kind of fail safes that were needed to be put in place that if anything happened to me, they would still kind of get their money and still get paid out. But that was appealing to me because yes, it's risky, but it's a little bit less risky when I'm not putting my own money on
Mhm.
the line. If that makes sense.
Yes, it complete sense, and that's one thing that people don't realize, that there are a lot of business opportunities out there that you can get into with very little to no cash out of your own pocket, uh, in these types of scenarios. Yes, you're signing your name on a dotted line for a loan for a long, short term, 5 years. And if the business did go south, you'd be on the hook for that
Yep.
personally, most likely. But
Yep.
you, especially in your situation, you have the background experience in that industry. You have some experience in that actual company. You could take a reasonable chance and understand that your downside is minimal.
The outside was pretty minimal, and when you break it up over the 5-year time frame, it was a reasonable amount of money to
Mhm.
pay each month or each
Yeah.
year,
Yep.
that even in a bad year or even in a year where we maybe break even or lose a little bit, it's almost like having 2 extra people on payroll, if
Yep.
that makes sense.
Yeah. And
Um,
presumably you're still paying yourself during these 5 years. So
yes. Yes.
if things got extremely tight, you could always
Right.
cut back on that temporarily. Uh, and the life insurance piece, I'd just like to touch on briefly. That was something that my bank made me take out a policy on myself when I was buying my business 13 years ago. And in retrospect, it was a good catalyst for me to go out. I had just had a newborn. It was a good reason for me to get out and get a policy that I should have had anyway. And it's another reason to get into buying a business earlier rather than later, because while we're still young, life insurance companies are more likely to insure us at reasonable rates versus, I know of a friend who lends small businesses money, and when somebody that he was trying to lend money to a few years ago just was not eligible for a life insurance policy anymore for health and
Yes.
age reasons, and it was too much of a risk for that lender to give him the money. So something to take in mind, even if you're not ready today to go buy a business, make sure you're getting life insurance if your life needs it. If you have
Mhm.
family and kids, it'll help you when
Yeah.
you buy your business.
Agreed, and even at, like, 40 when I went to apply for it, like, it's still pretty rigorous. You'd be shocked some of the questions they ask and what they wanna see, and, it's like, "Whoa, I think I'm pretty young and pretty healthy," but they definitely take that seriously.
Yep, they do. I just re-upped another policy, and it was more rigorous than it was 13 years ago.
Sure.
Um, so now that you're in the business, what are some of the ways that you plan to evolve it, to grow it, to change it, or are you just happy with the way it is and going status quo?
We have a really strong foundation, which is what was appealing to me about the business, but there wasn't a whole lot of growth happening over the last, call it, 5 to 10 years. And again, my mindset, my mentality is like, you're kind of getting better or worse. You can't really stay the same. And especially in the industry and the market we're in, the world that we're in today, if you're not really evolving and growing and getting better, you're going to become obsolete, or the competition's just going to get too steep for you. So to me, the big goal was growth, hiring some strategic key members to help grow the team, expanding, obviously keeping our Buffalo business, our Western New York business, but expanding even further. So much of what we do now is virtual. So that opens up a whole ton of doors, a lot of different companies we could support. So, the rebrand I went through this past January after owning the business for a year, for a lot of those reasons. I wanted to, when people thought of us, I didn't want them to just think of one of our service lines. I wanted them to think of a true talent solutions firm. We can really help you with all your people needs. Um, so the rebrand, growing the team, getting more clients, growing our top line revenue, working smarter. We didn't have a CRM in place. We needed an updated website. We needed some better processes and procedures in place. A lot of those kinds of things to just work more efficiently had to happen. So I feel like this last year was a lot of change. Um, my team was great about navigating that with me, but now we can kind of take a breath and now focus on, okay, what's that goal? What's that growth goal? And how do we achieve it? Because we've taken care of a lot of other things that had to get taken care of.
Yeah, that so you're adding a lot of technological you added a lot of technological pieces that often were overlooked by previous owners of
Yeah.
businesses that grew up in a different time, different
So
systems, different processes. That CRM piece, I was just looking at a business recently that really should have had a CRM. And CRM, for those that aren't familiar, is a customer relationship management software. There's tons of different ones out there now, but they help you track your communication with your customers and your potential customers so you can follow up, making sure you're following up on a regular basis to get those sales and build relationships. Um, so adding technology is almost kind of low hanging fruit in some
it
of these
is.
older businesses that have great potential to add value right off the bat. Um,
Right.
any were there any like immediate challenges or surprises that you found taking over?
That's a really good question. Oh gosh, immediate challenges.
And you
You
were
know,
there
I,
for a while, so I'm guessing there
yeah,
probably wasn't a ton.
I think that there's just some growing pains that occurred because we were, you know, I don't want to say stagnant, but we were sort of a well-oiled machine for so many years, running the business a certain way, and then all of a sudden I come in and it's like, okay, we're moving offices, we're going to rebrand, we're introducing these things, I'm hiring some people. And to me, I think change is exciting and necessary and I see all the benefits it's going to have. But I think for some of the existing employees, it's a lot to handle in the scope of a year,
Mhm.
especially when you've gone from like no change in 5 years to all of a sudden like significant change in 1 year. So I don't think I was as prepared or that surprised me a little bit, some people's reaction to the changes.
Did you lose any staff in the transition?
I did not lose any staff, which is great. So I
Mhm.
acquired 3 people. I hired 2, and then just this past year, I hired 2 more.
Awesome.
So, yeah, it's been really good. I think our team is finally right sized.
Great. You talked about rebranding. How quickly after you purchased did you do that?
So we started the process almost before I purchased the business. I was working with a marketing firm that I've worked with for years. They helped me with my business. Renowned creative, highly recommend them. We were starting to think about the brand story, the brand strategy, your brand promise, who are you trying to be, all those kinds of what's next goals. I was working with them for a few months and then acquired the business. And the thought process was let's at least give it a year under the old name so that, you have a change in the ownership, change in management, but they have the existing name. So there's some
Mhm.
continuity, which I completely agree with. But during that year of keeping the name, we were doing all the behind the scenes work for what's the new name, what's the new logo, what's the website look like, what are we gonna what's our brand promise, what are we trying to deliver, what's our value proposition, all that stuff. So just that takes a if you do it well, that takes a lot of time anyways. So I don't think I could have done it within before a year if I wanted to.
Yeah, and that's good. I think the timing, personally, I think when people try to rebrand too quickly after taking over a long established business, it can be kind of cause some issues or confusion or,
Disrupting.
potential, yeah, disruptive to existing customers or vendors that may not understand what's going on or be nervous and go find somewhere else to do business. So I think a year is probably a good timeline on that. How was it received when you did launch
Great.
the new brand?
It was received well, and I think, again, my marketing firm walked me through it, but there's a lot of communication that has to happen. You can't just flip a switch and be a new name, right? So there was a lot of newsletters that went out. There were a lot of emails that went out. There was a lot of exciting things to come, sneak peek,
Mhm,
holiday cards with kind of a link to, a preview of the new name. And so we really tried to kind of give them these breadcrumbs along the way to help them follow through the story and make sure, hey, we're the same company, same services, and same that business that you've learned to trust. We're still the same people. We've got goals and dreams for the future, and we need a bigger brand to help us get there.
nice. How you worked with the same company on your startup, the company you launched from scratch, and this rebrand. How did the process compare, and did you feel like you had more resources at your disposal the second time around?
I definitely had more resources the second time around. It was a much bigger investment because we had to, kind of do a whole overhaul. Um, the website needed to be completely redone. There was a lot there were more service offerings that we provided, so that website was bigger, included, my whole team, included testimonials, included clients we'd worked with in the past. Yeah. So it was a little bit more intense and involved than the first time around.
Mhm.
But I also knew how much better it was gonna look, and I trusted them because I saw what they did for me. So you know, I was confident it was gonna be good.
Uh, we touched a little bit on uncertainty of starting your own business and that type of thing. How did you handle the idea of leaving that stability of a job at Pepsi, which is a company that's probably not going anywhere anytime soon, to going on your own, and then also from going on your own to stepping into that role where you'll eventually be buying your current business?
Yeah. Um, Looking back, I would say that I am probably more of a risk taker than I realized. I've had a lot of personality assessments done, and I've learned a little bit about myself through things like StrengthsFinder, and I'm not afraid to take calculated risks. So I'm not one of those adrenaline junkies that's just going to jump off a bridge or a cliff. But if I've kind of weighed my options, I'm not afraid to move to a new city. I'm not afraid to take a new job. I'm not afraid to. I also think that I had come to a point in my career where I trusted myself and knew I had a certain level of skill and capability. I had a very supported family around me. Um, of course you're nervous and of course you're worried, is this going to work or not? But I realize that I'm probably never going to work harder for anyone than I will for myself. I just have that kind of inherent work ethic. Um, I'm very resilient. I'm very tenacious. And, I kind of had to just trust that if I don't know how to do something or something goes wrong, I'm going to have to just figure it out and, ask for help, which I'm not afraid to do. Um,
Is that risk-taking, calculated risk-taking attitude, is that something that you've always known you've had, or is that something that developed at some point along the road?
I don't think I had it as a child. I don't think I really had it as a teenager. Um, So I think it probably developed into adulthood as I started to gain more confidence in myself, and started to see, oh, okay, I do these things that maybe other people wouldn't do. Like I went away to college. I went 4 hours away to another state. Um, I studied abroad in Galway for 6 months. Probably would have stayed a year, but I was worried I was missing out on too much at home. I moved to New York City and I didn't even have really a place to live. I had like one friend and I found an apartment on Craigslist and moved in with a bunch of strangers. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would roll their eyes and say that's a really dumb idea. Um, so
I
is it
know if my
impulsive?
yeah,
Is it risk taking? I don't know.
yeah. Um, how would you for people that are in corporate jobs, corporate roles that they might be feeling stuck or feeling at the top of that ladder? You mentioned earlier you kind of solve for that by jumping around jobs, but how would you address somebody or give somebody the courage or advice to step out and take on their own thing or go out and buy a business from being feeling stuck in that role?
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier that everything is a risk. So while betting on yourself and leaving an organization feels risky, staying at an organization for 10, 15, 20 years is also risky. You run the risk of you start to become too well compensated. And eventually you get to a point where maybe they can find someone that's more junior and less expensive than you. Right. So it's just choose your hard kind of thing. If I'm going to take a risk, I'd rather risk and bet on myself than bet on an organization maybe keeping me around for 20 years. That I have very little faith in, and I might be biased there, but I do feel that you get to a ceiling in most companies where you better have an exit strategy or better be able to go do something on your own because you're probably not going to be there forever.
I wouldn't say that you're necessarily biased. I mean, maybe I guess that is biased, but because you've actually seen that with people,
Wow.
right? That customers, clients that you've dealt with that
Yep.
were let go for no apparent reason
hmm
that they can name, correct?
Yeah, and again, since like the '80s, we've had these kind of layoffs and reductions in force, and those aren't really going anywhere. And as the world gets more competitive and we more volatile, and companies are struggling to, you know, make profits, and especially if they're publicly traded, they're managing to the P&L, they're managing to the quarter.
Hmm.
Your biggest expense is payroll and benefits. So the quickest way to, make your P&L look better or make your shareholders happier is to eliminate some overhead. Um, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that philosophy, but we've seen it over and over again. We've also seen a lot now recently, a lot of outsourcing, a lot of automating, a lot of shipping jobs over to, using people in India and China and Mexico where labor is less expensive. And it certainly stinks for the people whose jobs are being impacted by that. But I don't see that trend going away anytime soon.
No, it's definitely not going to go away anytime soon. I was just talking to my cousin who is at a pretty large regional bank, and she was overseeing some contractors in India. And now the bank is shifting to just setting up an office and hiring full blown workforce there for IT and tech. Um, the and that I think that's happening also even at higher levels too. People always assume that it's just a low level
Sure.
admin type tasks that are getting outsourced overseas, but there are high level people working in finance and marketing and graphic design and video production all over the world that have
Mhm.
more and more access to all the same tools that we do here that have a lower cost of living and are willing to do stuff at a lower cost.
Right. Right.
Um, and that's, you touched on the corporate layoffs, going to the court, they're always focused on the quarterly reports. And there's a strong correlation from whenever companies announce layoffs to their share price going up because the big institutional investors know that that means that the P&L is going to be better because that
Sure.
big expense is going away in the short term. Whether or not I agree with you. It's not necessarily my style, and they're
Well,
probably thinking too short term, but that is the scenario these days. So somebody that thinks that their corporate job is zero risk or low risk might want to give entrepreneurship or buying a business a second thought because there may be less risk on that side.
yeah, or at least the same amount of risk, but at least I'd if my business fails, that's on me, but no one's gonna terminate me from a job. No one's gonna lay me off, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I've talked to people about as well, that you have that as your own boss, as the owner of the company. It is on you at the end of the day, but you have the flexibility and freedom to move quickly and make decisions
yep,
that can change the course of
and
your business. That
save things or help
Yep.
things.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly. We talked earlier about cutting your own salary if
Yep.
necessary in a pinch, cutting back on some of the benefits that you personally take, at the very
Right.
least. Um, how is there? I guess is there anything else that you would share with somebody in these corporate jobs that feel like they're uh, more secure for any reason?
I would say, I mean, my advice too is to always be adding value and just knowing that, again, the biggest expense for any business is its people, it's payroll and benefits. So if you are truly just a cost center and you're costing the company money and they don't see that you're really providing a lot of value or return on that investment, I think you're at more risk than someone who is, you know, out there, visible, adding a ton of value, helping, supporting. You don't have to be bringing in revenue necessarily, but they need to look at you as such an invaluable asset to the company that your name isn't going to be on that list, if you know what I mean. Um, that's what I would kind of say. If you decide to stay in an organization, continually add value and make sure you're learning, you're growing, you're adapting to the new leadership, you're adapting to technology, you're adapting to changes. You have a higher likelihood of sticking around
Hmm.
than saying, "Well, I've been here a long time and I've earned my stripes and I don't need to learn these things. I don't need to do these things." Um, and I think we talked earlier, being your own boss is not for everyone. For me, I love autonomy. I'm a critical thinker. I like to be creative. I'm not afraid to make decisions. So it kind of works well for someone like me. But there are people who, maybe you go into business with a friend or a couple of people and you have that more collaborative, supportive approach versus it can be kind of lonely at the top and a little scary to the buck stops with me, the ultimate decisions come down to me. If we if we succeed or fail, it comes down to me. But I'm kind of okay with that pressure, and maybe not everyone would be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's as much as I encourage people to go out and buy a business on the regular basis, I also do recognize that it is not for everybody. Um, you do need to have that courage and that willingness to let things fall to you, as you mentioned. But I also I don't like to see people get held back by their limiting beliefs or
Yeah.
by their imposter syndrome that they're not the one, they're not the right one. Because it is a real thing. You know, there's never going to be a perfect time or right scenario for you, and the longer you wait, the less, sometimes the more constrained you feel. You talked about the fact that
Mhm.
you work on a job for a long time, the salary goes up. It sounds like a great thing, but for most people, their lifestyle also increases, and then their options are more and more limited because they
Mhm.
need to replace such a larger income, and they've got family and house payments and car payments and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
the sooner the
And you're
better.
you're right. I do think, like, going back to my scenario, I was a very, very shy child, very quiet, very passive, had no interest in being a business owner in my 20s, you know? So people can change. And I think I know all different personalities and all different introvert, extrovert people who are very successful business owners. I don't think there's a certain model of what's the makeup of a successful business owner. I think they come in all shapes and sizes. They come in all personalities, all backgrounds. But I think if I had to kind of boil it down, I think there's definitely that courage, that ability to take that risk, the confidence in themselves, the willingness to learn, the leveraging your support system or finding a support system, learning from others who've been in your shoes, learning from experts. That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And the work ethic, because it's
Yes.
a lot of work. A
Yes.
lot of work.
Yep. You have to be willing to work, uh, but at the same time, also working towards finding the systems and processes and people that can make your life a little bit easier and take more burden off of you. Uh, we've kind of, I talk about doing getting into business as soon as you can. And I realize that that's not necessarily, you don't want to jump into buying a business as a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old necessarily. But we also have talked about not wanting to wait too late in life. Do you think that there is an ideal age or time frame or experience level when it makes sense?
That's a good question. I mean, for my own experience, I think if I had tried to do it anytime I was 35 when I left Pepsi, I think any earlier, people wouldn't have taken me seriously. And I don't know if that's ageism, gender bias, what have you, but even at 35, I felt a little bit like that. Like, who the hell are you to tell me how to do things? Like, how much experience do you have?
I see 22-year-olds on Instagram calling themselves life coaches. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't,
I think it depends on what business it is.
yeah,
I was going into big employers, big corporations that could hire a lot of different types of consultants, and they want someone with that background and that experience and that what are your certifications and what are your credentials and where have you worked and how many they're looking for years of experience. Some places might see, if you're like a videographer, you're doing something with AI, maybe they skew younger. Um, but I think for what I do, anything earlier would have been hard for people to take me seriously.
yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's definitely some businesses, especially if you're the face of the business and in a consulting type role where you're supposed to be bringing experience to the table. It does help to have more of that experience
Yeah.
versus some businesses where the owner is completely behind the scenes or doesn't necessarily have to express their experience to the customers. It
Yeah.
can be different, and a younger demographic is perfectly fine in that scenario. Um,
I mean,
looking,
I do think if
yeah,
I to go on the flip
yeah,
side, though, I think if I waited till I was, like, in my 50s, I don't know if I would have the energy
hmm
and the tenacity and just the stomach for
yeah,
some of the stuff that I've had to do in the last couple of years.
yeah. I, I would probably agree with that, not knowing your whole scenario, your whole situation, but I've seen that in other business owners. I've met a lot of people over the years that have said, "Oh, I'll wait till I'm, close to retirement, and then I'm thinking about buying this restaurant or buying this little retail store." And I've always kind of shook my head and said, "Why wait till you're in your 50s or even
Right.
60s to go buy that business as a retirement uh, that's going to lock you up for another couple years, at the bare minimum, a couple years of long days and nights before you could possibly get a staff in place and systems down." So, yeah, I think waiting too long is definitely a mistake as well. You do have to have the energy.
Right, and I mean, for me, I wanna start slowing down in my 50s and 60s. I wanna start being able to take my family for vacation for 2 weeks and not have to check emails or not have to, just be confident things are running smoothly, and that's not when I would wanna be starting up a business. Those first couple years, whether you start or buy a business are pretty grueling. And I don't wanna it's like I could run a marathon in my 50s or I could run one in my 30s. You know, which is gonna be a little easier on the body.
Yep. Yep, that's exactly right. Um, but it does, at the same time, it does help to have some experience, some background. So like those late 20s, early 30s, I think is a great time personally to
Yeah.
start thinking about uh, getting into buying a business. You have a little bit of experience under your belt, but you still
Mhm.
have the youth and energy to do a lot more. Um, how has owning this business changed or enriched your life personally or professionally?
I'm trying to think. That's a really good question. I feel like I'm really building equity in something. I feel like I'm building a company that one day, you know, my kids probably won't wanna work at my organization, but they could. That's kind of a cool feeling. Or just, friends or family, people that I care about could work here. Um, I'm learning a ton, which I love. I love to grow and learn, so that's really enriching for me. And I haven't really managed people for years. It's been a while. So now I have a whole team. I have a team of like 7 now, and I like seeing them grow and develop. I like seeing them succeed. I like watching them come up with creative solutions to things, and so that's I think what I was missing when I worked for myself, just being a solopreneur. I miss that team environment. Um, so that's been really cool.
Awesome. Do you want to share a little bit about your services or who your ideal customer is, or if there's somebody out there listening that could benefit from your business?
Yeah, so as I said before, we're a talent solutions firm. We've been around for almost 40 years. We've primarily serviced Western New York. But what we really do is everything from helping you recruit people to retain them, to develop them, to even transitioning your talent. So all those life stages of an employee, we can help with. We have a search division, we have a training and development coaching division, and we have our career transition outplacement division. Our ideal clients are probably mid to large organizations that employ, 100 plus people. We've worked with smaller, we've worked with, you know, huge entities, but, ideally, we like clients we can work with and they leverage maybe 2 of our services, so we can really get into the organization and help them in many different areas. Yeah.
Anything else you would like to add before we close out?
I don't know, I think this has been a great experience. I would say that if someone's considering buying a business or becoming a business owner, that do your research and talk to people who've done it and really understand it, because you might have a lot of preconceived notions. You might have a lot of, you know, fears and worries that might not be warranted. And, there's so many ways to make a living. There's so many ways to earn a paycheck. It's not the days where you have to go work for a company for 40 years and retire. So, be creative with it and think broadly about what it might be for you, and a lot of times it's a little bit of both. You might still have your corporate job and you start your side business, and it starts small and then it builds traction, and then all of a sudden you can leave the corporate job.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Awesome. Yeah. The getting rid of preconceived notions, I think, is a huge aspect. Forgetting what you think you might know about buying a business. I mentioned earlier, people assume that you have to have a lot of money. That's a very bad preconceived notion because you don't. And
yeah,
then your own limiting beliefs and your own imposter syndrome, getting rid of all of that and moving
right.
forward.
Or, I gotta wait till my kids are out of the house. I gotta wait till, you know, my kids were like 6 and 8 when I bought this business. So certainly not an ideal time, but it never really is. So,
No,
you
it's
know,
never. There's never an ideal time. That's. I mean, my daughter was one when I bought my business. It's Yeah, there's never an ideal time, so you may as well just jump in and get
Yeah,
going.
yeah,
Life
just
doesn't
start.
wait.
Mhm. Yeah, thank
Awesome.
you so much.
Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. If anybody would like to find out more about you or your company, I will drop the link to your company in the show notes below. Um, and if look forward to hearing from everybody on questions, comments, and if you have a minute, hit the subscribe button on your podcast app. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Lindsay, for being here. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Business Buying for Financial Independence. If you're serious about owning your time and building long-term wealth, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.